since January. Williamson said he was hugely grateful to the families, students, and all those working in education for their role in making it happen. Despite the continued testing regimes, concern is still mounting in schools surrounding the Delta variant, which is thought to have a 40% higher transmission rates than other COVID variants. That was your daily education news briefing.
Thank you to Megan for the news. Awesome. So I'm going to go transition straight in before I get into the inevitable tangent that is my soul. Well, first of all, you know what? I don't know about the rest of you, but I am very much looking forward to hello, my EdTech life. Welcome to Teachers Talk Radio Twilight Show. How are you doing? Hope you're doing all right. Thank you so much for tuning in. Very welcome. So yeah, I was going to say, any message to the listeners on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube? Yeah, it's just my first show going out to those things. I think it might be. I just found a bit of branch in my hair. I don't know why I've been headbutting trees. Massive welcome to anyone listening on any of our social networks. Yeah, massively welcome. Hopefully you will enjoy some of the content tonight. I'm going to get into some of it imminently. And yeah, much fun. So yeah, that's kind of up there. I don't know about you guys, but I am excited about the Euros kicking off on Friday as well. Big football fan over here. I just want to say my team, my five-a-side team won last night. Top bins from me from behind the halfway line. Just going to put it out there. May or may not have immediately injured myself, but you know, it's all good. I'll pretend like I'm actually any good at football, and I'm really not. But yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited to, controversially, I'm excited to watch England lose. I am. It's one of those things. It's as an Irishman in England, you very much have to support whoever England's playing, because certainly our countries aren't getting into it. So controversial. So let's get into some things for this week then. So first thing, I always like to start off with who is going to be on board the Graham train this week. So the Graham train is literally, I can't even remember why it came up. I'm pretty sure this was this was actually Graham Column's idea that we kind of ad-libbed at some point, really randomly. It came out of a joke thing. Essentially what it is it's people who, kind of in education, who I think I would quite like to kind of sit and pick their brains for a while, perhaps on a train journey. And my example of this is always, I live in Warrington, and it's a 2-hour train journey to get to London Euston. I always think, who would I like to pick the brains off for that time? Maybe enjoy a lukewarm beer on the Avanti West Coast service down to London. Other train services are available. And yeah, kind of just pick the brains. And I've had lots of different people I've volunteered lots of people for this so far. I don't know if it's a great honor. I would imagine not. I imagine they don't even know. So I think the person who's going to go in this week, I think, is kind of self-explanatory in many ways. Very well published. I've done loads and loads of things for education over the years. Has done lots of stuff that is actually the basis of pedagogy in many different schools. And that person that I'm going to volunteer to sacrifice his tribute to the Graham train is Tom Sherrington this week. So Tom Sherrington is going to be the person I'm going to put in for the Graham train this week. Indeed, that's right, Graham train. So the reason I kind of going for Tom there is a couple of different things. I think the Rosenshine Principles book is obviously wonderful. I know that's obviously kind of just sharing kind of the Rosenshine Principles, which Tom didn't come up with, obviously. But I think its practical applications are clear for everyone to see, and I think lots of people have used that now. I also think the walkthroughs books are wonderful. I've recently rolled them out via CPD to my school to make sure that every department has a copy of each one. just because I think that they're really useful for providing like walkthrough feedback, providing clear feedback. If your department has some kind of pedagogical target, I think they're really good for focusing in on them. And I think it's very cleverly done. I think that all of the stuff that's kind of put together, but obviously you've got this wonderful blog, Teacher Head, which I'm actually going to reference later on as well, like immediately after this. I'll segue into it. You know, it's going to be smooth. I think all of that stuff has kind of been really, really important with regards to improving the lives and helping teachers everywhere in terms of creating CPD, amongst many other different things. So massive thanks to kind of Tom Sherrington for all of the stuff that he does, all over that he does to help teachers all over not just the country, but I guess all over the globe from that. And massive thank you, because I know that it's obviously made my life a lot easier with CPD provision and stuff like that in the past. And I've really enjoyed the walkthroughs books, Rosenshine books, and yeah, what's not to love, what's not to use, really. So yeah, fantastic. Now I'm going to segue straight into that, because I know this has actually come up, and it's really interesting. This is resurfaced again, because it's kind of been at the forefront of my mind recently. And I noticed that it was shared again by Tom Sherrington, and I noticed it was also liked by Rachel Ball, who has the unfortunate honor of having to work with me as of September. So unlucky, Rachel. But yeah, which was the blog title it's actually from December 2017. So it's not a new blog by any means, but I think it is one of those things that stands the test of time, and it becomes particularly pertinent regardless of when you look at it. And it is 10 ways the gold dust of CPD time is wasted. And the very first sentence of this just says CPD time is precious, and that couldn't be more valid, I think. CPD time is incredibly precious to us as teachers. It's incredibly precious to us as heads of department. All of these different things, and I think it's so unbelievably important. I think for so many different reasons. And yeah, I just had a phone call, and then it just immediately went kind of off. So yeah, if you want to try bringing back again, we're happy to have you on. I do apologize for missing that there. Just literally 2-second call straight off. But yeah, so I think that's kind of one of those things. It's really useful for us. I like to kind of think that department meetings should essentially be CPD. I think that's the way we should be running them. I think that the less admin we do in department meetings, the better. Like, I can't emphasize enough how important that I think that is to do CPD and that. But yeah, there's lots of ways of doing it. And I'm sure we've all sat in CPD in our careers where we've thought, you know what, not a fan of this. We're not a fan of this for one reason or another. But I actually think that getting CPD right and making sure we're not wasting our CPD time, whether that's whole school insets, and I'm sure I can think of many wonderful examples of whole school insets, but I'm sure many people have got examples of school insets they weren't as keen on, or things that they felt like, I could have had my time doing this. So there's many, many, many different examples I'm sure that everyone can think of kind of CPD time that has been wasted for. And there's so many kind of new wonderful ideas out there. It's Kit Jones. Hey, Kit Jones, how's it going? Kit Jones says, getting CPD right is so important, but we know it doesn't always happen. It certainly does not always happen. We've always sat on things and we go, it's the same thing 2 years in a row, or, I've had this before, or I know this, I could do something more bespoke in this time. And there's so many wonderful ideas out there, and it doesn't necessarily mean getting somebody in to deliver it. We don't need to get other people in to necessarily deliver it. I think it's more about the fact we just need to make sure we're getting it right. Have we researched it well? Have we thought about how it's going to be delivered? As kind of people organizing teaching and learning, or department leads, have we got the right people leading it? Because we all know that sometimes the people who've got the best ideas aren't necessarily the ones who've got to do the best delivery. Or how can we make sure that is the case? How can we train them in their delivery? How can we help them make sure they're delivering it at the right tone? Hi, Tullian, hope you're doing all right. So yeah, some of the kind of different things that are mentioned here is, one of the obviously key barriers is time, says Tom Sherrington. All too often, teacher CPD time feels like it's eked out, scraped, cobbled together, begged and borrowed instead of what it should be, a central structural spine. That's why I rolled my R for no apparent reason, around which professional discourse revolves. That's right, another R rule there. So lots of different things in there. I think that's really important. I think it should be, we should try and be less reactive. I mean, as a department, I think the reactive thing's okay. If you see some things in walkthroughs and you're like, oh, you know what? I think that our I don't know. I don't think we're hitting. It's just because Kate said I was thinking retrieval practice. We're not hitting our retrieval practice. I don't think our retrieval practice is quite where it needs to be. Then do some training on that as a department. That's fine. But I think our whole school stuff, like how can we proactively do it? What do you want the school to look like? If you're in charge of teaching and learning or influential in teaching and learning, how can you? Hello, thank you for just joining for live. Thank you for sharing the show. If you're kind of, what do you want the school to look like by the end of the year? And try not having too many things cooking at one time, right? Try and not have too many things cooking at one time. What's the one thing you want to achieve? How are you going to achieve it? So on and so forth. So, 10 ways that the goal of CPD time is wasted, according to Tom Sherrington. 1, extra tasks from SLT, right? So that's the first one. We'll just get them to do the survey during their CPD session, right? That's a big one, isn't it? There, so just kind of adding in surveys or things people can go away and do in the middle of a CPD session. The CPD should be high impact, immediate, right there. Let's not do time ticking exercises in the middle of CPD. Let's use that as efficiently as possible. Kate Jones says there's a lot on Twitter. I've been asked to deliver CPD on X, but I don't know where to start. I think that's an interesting one because I know that I've done CPD at times on things like that, and I actually feel like the research on there is sometimes it's really helpful. But then it's also, do we have the right people in the right places? But I guess if you're in charge of teaching and learning, right, and there's maybe nobody in your school who really knows their stuff about metacognition, maybe you do need to go and do the research on that. I don't know. Maybe it's useful to kind of hand on to those things. I don't know what kind of the thinking is there. Sometimes a really useful thing to start, but perhaps we just need to make sure we're reaching out to experts. Twitter's a wonderful thing for that. I think that's one of the big things that I find with kind of Twitter is that I love connecting with people through that. I wouldn't be, I think, half the teacher that I am today if it wasn't for the wonderful people, the wonderful connections I've made on Twitter, it has to be said. So that's the first thing, is kind of just extra menial tasks from SLT. The second one, Tom Sherrington says, is inefficient whole staff gatherings. So we'll just have a quick 10-minute briefing in the hall before they go off into departments. If you are going to do that, what's the purpose? Is it high impact? Is it necessary? Like perhaps it is. Perhaps there's an important element there where you need to have people together and they need to kind of have the why explained. But is there a better way of doing that? Is perhaps a way of looking at this. 3, extra input on yet another really important thing. So, for example, Sue just wants a quick 10 minutes on the new school trip procedures. It's really important, right? Obviously, we can all think of many times when something like that's been kind of fired out. And that happens countless times, doesn't it? It happens countless times where there's something kind of comes out that's really important. How many people run school trips? Can you do a meeting with them, right? Because, you know, there's multiple people who never run a school trip. Does it really need to be 10 minutes with them? Possibly not. Kate Jones references John Hattie. I love how good your references are, Kate. They're all just consistent. Know thy impact. All about the impact. See, Kate Jones knows. Kate Jones knows. Sorry for his full naming you consistently, Kate. I do apologize. Number 4, people are missing. So in the year 11 interventions on central detention duty, a really important fixture, a really important parental meeting. SLT, you've got a really important meeting. So is CPD as effective if people are missing from it? And again, it's the impact of that, I guess, as well. I think that the whole thing is, if SLT are missing from a meeting or CPD, what's the message that that's putting across? It's probably a negative one. It's the message that I think this is important for you, but not important enough for me. Make your CPD important enough that everyone needs to be there. right? I think that's ultimately, obviously there will be times when the reactive nature of, like, for example, the pastoral system means that can't necessarily happen. If there's an incident that all of a sudden the police are involved in it, you need to go and meet somebody, that's a bit different. But if there's separate meetings organized over it, I think that undermines potentially the importance of the CPD being delivered. Right, that would make sense. And with procedural issues, so going through minutes, discussing the test, create boundaries, organizing a book issue system. I do actually disagree with some of that. I think some of that does need to be gone through, because let's face it, there's two sides of this. I think that some of these things are really interesting, but I actually think that some of the kind of more procedural stuff, you can never be too clear, right? Ben Barker always said that. You can never be too clear. If you need to repeat stuff, and let's face it, systems make a school. I'll say it again, systems make a school. If systems aren't being effective, then they're maybe not being communicated effectively enough. So going through them again and reminding people about things could be really, really important. So part of me disagrees with that a little bit. And perhaps discussing the rationale behind test boundaries isn't necessarily a bad thing. But again, perhaps you would take that with heads of department and do that in that way. Or speak to specific members of specific heads of department to kind of follow up on that to make sure nobody's time's wasted. 6, Tom says, listening to Dave give his hyper puppy evangelist presentation about the latest app fad gizmo thing. Ooh, a bit technophobic, I suppose, in that way. You know what? I have sat through a couple of techno gizmo sessions in my time that I haven't necessarily found useful, but at the same time, I've also found some of them to be amazing. I guess it's just about the checks and balances that ensure before it goes into place that it is actually going to be useful for multiple different people. Like, I keep forgetting it. What's the one that has been used really recently because of, really commonly across teaching now because of the lockdowns? I always forget the name of this, and I have used it. It's the voice notes that you can leave on students' work. I always keep forgetting it, but it was so useful. And we did a training session on it, and it was amazing. I just keep forgetting the name of it because we're quite app friendly, because we do have all the students have devices and whatnot in my school, but I can't remember the name of it with the life in it, but it's amazing. You record like verbal feedback for the students and it attaches to the work and stuff in its class. But things like that, I find that really, really useful. In the same way that I find things like Quizlet really useful to find out different ways that we could use that. Seneca, massively useful in terms of how can you apply Seneca to homework. So I suppose that if it was every single week the latest tech, I can see why that wouldn't be applicable. But I actually do think that it's useful to do that. Number 7, says Tom Sherrington, is talking about doing things instead of doing things. So plans about future actions. That's such a good point. Yeah, talking about the idea of talking about something is a bit pointless. And to be fair, I think, again, everyone could probably think of a time when somebody's been saying, create something about this, just to let you know this is coming. But then somehow that message, which could be conveyed exactly like that, lasts 15 minutes. And ultimately, the only thing that's important is the plan. So just come back to us with the plan there. Interesting. Really good point. I think that one. Number 8, robbing CBD time for admin. Yes, I love this one. Really important. The exam review performer, the scheme of work layout and rota. Yeah, to be fair, that stuff's really, really important, I think, in terms of, I think the less admin we do in CPD time, the more effective our CPD is. If we do use it, admin is one of those things you can kind of do as quick touch elements, or, again, you have to be really careful. You do want to try and go towards an inbox zero approach. You don't want to have just relentless emails because people will miss them. Certainly people who are involved in the pastoral system who get like 100 emails a day. But yeah, I do think there's an element of that certainly to be discussed. Number 9, scattergunning, which is everybody chipping in their really great ideas without any real focus. Nothing really moves on from there. So I do actually think getting people involved getting people's ideas involved at early stage is really important, because sometimes people come up with some things that are really good, but just having like a general lack of focus. So maybe share them into the vision. How can people help you get there? But also maybe have that meeting on a smaller scale. If you have that in a whole school environment, you're going to have 100 ideas, and that's not really useful to anyone. And then 10, Tom Sherrington's last idea is flitting. So each meeting happens as if the last one didn't. Nothing sticks or gets embedded. And again, that's such an important thing with regards to what I think you should do is, if you're in charge of teaching and learning, or indeed heavily involved in teaching and learning, is think about, before a year begins, what are your 3 focus points for the year? How are you going to get there? And think about, for each individual thing that happens, how is that leading you to your end goal? How is that going to help you to get to the point at the end of the year where exactly where you wanted to be at the very beginning of it? So it's not just a case of, here's a random session on this, and then we're bouncing to something completely different on this. How does it build upon each other? And I actually think that one of the ways of doing that is delivering a session, so the rationale on a session, having an opportunity or encouraging people to go away and practice it, and then people coming back and saying, what were the things that worked really well on this? What were the flaws with this? How can we do it better? And then having like a consolidation session upon that as well. You could even, it doesn't necessarily need to be that you get people together to share those ideas. It could be whoever leads the session canvasses ideas independently. So you go and touch base with people and go, oh, you tried that? How's it worked for you? What were the things that worked for you? What were the things that didn't work for you? I think are all really, really important ways, I guess, of doing that. And yeah, and obviously there's a last one that's kind of mentioned in there by Nick Middleton, who's been kind of put on to the end of this, is number 11, which is cancelling the CPD session altogether, because something much more pressing appears to have materialized, because that does undervalue the CPD session, I think, going forward into the future. And Tom Sherrington's advice is, obviously the answer is to try not to do these things. Treat CPD time with the reverence it deserves, and to use every minute of it. To develop ideas, to refine teachers' understanding and practice in teaching, curriculum, thinking and assessment, using a deliberate practice approach, focused, sustained, sharing feedback, planning next steps, and focused on specific students and their learning. So that is some awesome and wonderful advice from Tom Sherrington. And again, one of the many reasons why Tom is the member of the person who's been recently elected to the most recent Graham Train. So thank you very much to Tom.
Introducing Amanda Davey. Amanda is one of the first specialist teacher assessors for dyscalculia in the UK and offers dyscalculia tutoring and bespoke training for schools. With 26 years of teaching and tutoring experience in the UK, Amanda offers specialist online tuition focused on building confidence and developing skills. Amanda also offers online and face-to-face training on dyscalculia for educators, informing practitioners as to how to identify children that may have dyscalculia and how to support them in class. Find out more about Amanda and what she can offer you at www.amanda-davey-dyscalculia.co.uk.
Awesome, fantastic. So yeah, Albers, woo! We're in the big time, ladies and gentlemen. We're in the big time. Yeah, so fantastic. Loads and loads of different things on there. Thank you, obviously, for Tom Sherrington for all of those wonderful ideas. And yeah, oh my goodness me. I am warm, as I said already, folks. I am boiling in this particular room. Going to start stripping off in a second. Fortunately, again, it's okay. It's radio. Nobody ends up having to vomit. It's all good. Okay, so let's get on to my, I guess, main feature of the podcast in many ways. And that is kind of the idea. So I put out a tweet on the 3rd of June, which was last Thursday. And that was, I essentially my tweet just said, and it ended up becoming by a significant distance my most popular tweet. Perhaps not the most controversial, but certainly one of them. And I just said, PowerPoints are not a compulsory part of education. I think that some confuse PowerPoint with preparation. You can prepare a lesson without one, and the reliance upon them has a de-skilling impact, in my opinion. Now, I do think some people jumped on that and went, PowerPoint's great, don't ban PowerPoint. Because obviously Twitter is that thing where people read it and just decide that they want to take the most extreme view possible. So yeah, it's an interesting one. I think that one sometimes, isn't it? But it was interesting. A colleague of mine who has Twitter but doesn't really pay attention to a huge amount of things outside of that, said, he said he nearly jumped in. Actually, he never really comments on things on Twitter. He nearly jumped in, just telling people that they just clearly hadn't read what I was saying. And I did have to end up prefacing it by saying, I put in an extra thing saying, like, for context, I don't mean get rid of them entirely. I enjoy using them. I use them in the majority of my lessons, but I think many become reliant on them or see not using them as a lack of planning, which I think is bad practice, as I think a skilled and experienced practitioner may not need one. I do think we're at a point where some of them are too cumbersome. And I know that by working with Mike Childs this year, he's done some really good work on stripping back the resources in geography, because often we put too much in them, and teachers are the lesson in the case of excellent lessons, I think. So yeah, it's an interesting one from there. So again, if you've got any interesting ideas on PowerPoints and how they're used, then please feel free to share. As I said, I think that they're a useful resource. I think we overstate them. I think we're at a point where now we feel like we need to use them in every lesson, whereas I don't think we do. I think that there can be lessons where you can go to town using like a whiteboard, textbooks, and you don't need necessarily a slide pack to go with it. I think that there's lots of other things in that as well. Like I think that I think there's loads of other things to that as well. I think that you can use, obviously, visualizers are awesome with regards to things like that. So visualizers would mean you don't necessarily need to do that. But yeah, I think there's loads of different interesting things about that. So there's lots of people who said, yeah, 100%. For me, I got 605 likes, which for context is about, I get over 33% of my follower count, which is, I think, remarkably high for that. And again, as I said, was by distance the most popular tweet that I ever put out, or unpopular perhaps in many cases. And lots of people kind of agreed with it, saying, I'm amazed that people are still using it instead of kind of more versatile, interactive, less one-dimensional softwares like Notebook, said Chris Regan. Obviously, there was some people were very quick to stress, but some in a relatively aggressive way, saying that, PowerPoint's really, really useful in terms of doing whole department planning and reducing teacher workload in that way. And I actually agree with that. In the 7 years that I've been either a head of department or head of faculty, I've never had a faculty in that 7 years, or a department in the 7 years, that hasn't shared every resource, right? I've always got certain staff in charge of certain year groups. And then obviously it's a case of go and adapt the resources to your classes. Is very much the kind of encouragement there. So I'm very aware that's the case. So some people kind of did jump on it, including the kind of Gavin Williamson parody account, which just decided to get a little angry and miss the point entirely. But yeah, I agree with that completely. I do think we should actually share resources. I know some departments that don't, and I'm not a huge fan of that, although I do understand there's some rationale around it with regards to you don't want staff to just put up a set of slides because, and it's an interesting one, this is again one of the things I think that PowerPoint has had a negative impact on us. I know that there's people out there, and again, we'd be very naive to assume that there isn't. I remember I said something like this last year about we can't just trust teachers to put in lots of grades without any accountability measures in place, because some people will take the mick. And we've seen that being the case last year. Like, there's loads of examples of people whose A stars went up by something like 50% in A level and ridiculous stuff like that. I think it's the same thing. We can't assume that if people have got slides made for them, that they're going to do anything other than check it a little bit before the lesson, or indeed glance over it and then just fire them up. We all know staff who have done that. Now, the flip side of that is it helps staff who are prepared. It helps staff that are non-subject specialists as well. I think there's loads of different elements in there. Andrew Farmer says, if you use PowerPoints with Key Stage 4 or 5 students, do you share the slides with them? Absolutely. I absolutely do. We kind of encourage that anyway. We use the Google Suite quite frequently in my school. Every student's got either an iPad or a Samsung device, or has an iPod Touch. So yeah, we share all of our PowerPoints with our students, usually from Key Stage 3 and above. Yeah, we absolutely do. Sometimes, obviously, you share slightly abridged student versions of them that may not have like certain answers on there that you want them to. But yeah, I absolutely do share them in there, and I share them in as viewers of whole packs of resources, really, because I think that's important to do. I think they should have access to that, because I think it can make a tremendous revision resource. And again, that's one of the big things is if you kind of just do it on a whiteboard. That's what I guess one of the downsides of that is obviously the fact that that's kind of, unless they've kind of copied every single thing down, then I guess it kind of misses out on that. Kate Jones says, I know teachers can become reliant on PowerPoint to guide them through a lesson, but we don't always need one. That's essentially my point there. It's great for dual coding. It's great for source work. It's great for videos. I know there's some subjects you couldn't do without it. It's good for having your title or hypothesis plus your success criteria in one place at the beginning. It's good for having your do now on the board whenever students are going to get settled. But I do think that, and I'm going to come into some of the other weaknesses I think that exist in them in a second, but I do think that they are a really important resource. And I think some people reacted quite negatively to the post because they assumed I was saying get rid of them, and I'm not, because I think if we did that, the profession would be significantly worse off. And what my main argument is that we shouldn't see a lesson without a PowerPoint as being a bad lesson because it doesn't have a PowerPoint. We also shouldn't feel the need to always use one. And I guess it's because of exactly what Kate Jones says, badly designed PowerPoints with too much content, too many images, transition images that don't match, weird transitions, font sizes that aren't great, it splits attention, absolutely. Megan, our wonderful newsreader, says, I love a PowerPoint. It makes life so much easier when you have absent students or isolated students too. That's absolutely a super point in the current climate. Yeah, we're running a hybrid system where if we have anyone who's off at the minute, we run a hybrid system. So I've got an earpiece and I'll zoom the lesson out, and I'll just share on Zoom my PowerPoint, and as I go through it in the lesson, boom, it's done. It's a really straightforward thing to do. And it also means that they can, if there's anything, I also upload it, because as you said, it means if there's any issues with internet problems at home, they can catch up on anything that they might have missed. And they can check the notes of the slides if there are any. I think all of that's really, really important. Kate Jones says, I hate Comic Sans on PowerPoint. I hate Comic Sans on anything. To be fair, Comic Sans is Satan. I love the fact that I was told at one point that Comic Sans, genuinely, I remember this in my PGC, and don't get me started on my PGC, because that's a whole new thing. At one point, I'll just do a whole rant on it, because I think it was abysmal, some of the things I was told. People tell me that Comic Sans kind of was the main way. Oh yeah, Comic Sans is the main way for people to learn. It makes things easier. And then people a little bit later coming up and going, oh, it's a little bit more difficult to read, so that makes it stick in their brains more. And I was like, right, people are just talking out their backsides at this point, because I've heard both extremes of this. Comic Sans, garbage, get away. We need to be teaching. My mind is that we need to be teaching students in the most academic way possible. They're not going to submit essays at university in Comic Sans, and if they do, they'll be vomited on, rightfully so. Teach all lessons in Wingdings. I would enjoy that. That would be good. Just go permanent cracking the code. Do you remember Wingdings? Wingdings had all that controversy, didn't it? If you typed in certain things, it was something to do with like 9/11 and stuff, wasn't it? People, I've never seen the more ridiculous thing of people creating like conspiracy theories out of a font. Andrew Farmer makes a really good point there as well, which is I worry certain students may switch off in lessons if they know they'll have the slides later. Very valid point, actually. Yeah, really, really good point. And it's just, how do you do that? I mean, I circulate around the classroom nonstop. I'm very fortunate that we've never had a policy where we've had to stand in a weird box at the front. I know many schools have. I hate that. I think it's one of the worst things we can do for students. I think circulating in a classroom is one of the most powerful tools a teacher can have. I'll circulate. I'll go, right, you've not got enough written down. So unless you get written down to this, you're going to be standing behind it at the end of the day or at break time or at lunchtime. Yeah, I think it's the thing to do with that. But I know what you're saying. It's about engaging with it. Complacency and engagement are not necessarily the same thing, is it? Tom Hopkins-Burke says, moved away from PowerPoints for GCSE classes. Nothing a booklet can't do. Very true, actually. I actually really enjoyed using booklets on Zoom and using things like that on Zoom. I thought it was more interactive at times. And yeah, I actually agree with you. I think booklets are really, really good. Andy Farmer says, I'm thinking about asking students to reflect on how they use the slides in their own time. That's a good idea. Maybe giving them some hints and tips of how to use them, because not everyone will know how to. Is perhaps a really valid point. Comic Sans is Marmite. You know what? I've never tried Marmite, but I do find it interesting. If you don't like Marmite and you drink Bovril, you're a weirdo, because I consider them to be much of a muchness. I've actually got a delicious cooking tip with Marmite for you in a second, Tom Hopkinsburg. Don't worry. Don't worry. I got something for everybody. But yeah, I went to my first football game when I first moved to Lancaster in 2012. Yeah, I remember somebody said, "Oh, you get some Bovril." And to be fair, it was freezing. I've never been so cold in my life. And yeah, it was. I was like, I'll get it because I've heard of it being a thing. It's just a cup of bad gravy, isn't it? What's that about? It's just thin meat stock. It's grim. Get out of my life. I do not need Bovril in my life. Marmite, I do, and I'm going to tell you. And it's, you know what? Tom Hopkinsburg has just shared a link in the chat, which is a link to and I quote, mighty Marmite lentil soup. Tom Hopkinsburg, there's a reason that the website is www.sanitarium.co.nz. There's a reason why that is a sanitarium one, I think. Not just because of the excellent Metallica song. Listening to that on my way home, actually. Listening to it from the Manchester concert 2019. Yeah, I was there. Do you remember concerts? They were good. But yeah, my top tip for Marmite is actually, if you're making a gravy, add a generous dollop of Marmite into it. It gives it a really nice beefy flavor. I actually use Marmite if I'm ever making an onion gravy. I always add a little bit of Marmite to it because it adds a little bit more meatiness to the gravy. And you know what? You might think that's weird. It is unbelievable. Marmite and Marmite mashed potato. Megan, we're going to have words. We're going to have words here. What is Marmite mashed potato? Oof. What is that about? I need more deets on that one, because if it works in the same way that it works in a gravy, I can see that being delicious, but I don't want to like it, if that makes sense. Megan, I seem to remember the last time you were commenting on the show, I remember you mentioned something odd then as well. I can't remember what it was. But it was something else really odd. Was it a dessert or something? I don't know. Marmite mashed potato, I am curious about. Not my thing. But Tom Hopkinsburg, just in case you missed that. Marmite and onion gravy. Boom. You're welcome. Chocolate toothpaste. That's exactly what it was. I went and told my wife about that later on. Why is it called toothpaste? Because it's got a tiny bit of cream on top. What? So yeah, a couple of extra points on there. Megan said, very good point about switching off. I send my PowerPoints out in 5 lesson packs and set a revision homework based around them for A-level classes. I like that. It's a really good idea. Tom Hopkinsburg says, 21st century MT, or twicent is a smart-looking dyslexia-friendly font. Yeah, I think that's important to remember to make it dyslexia-friendly. I imagine we're at the point now where people aren't doing this, but we should remember we should never use black font on a white background. Don't do it. It's the hardest thing to read in the planet for students who are dyslexic. And go for like a nice beige background, and nice pastel colors. Pastel colors are great, right? Kids love pastel colors at the minute. They're all the rage in terms of highlighters and stuff. Fantastic. The main man himself is here. Khalil, how's it going? Yellow background, he's heard. Yeah. Like a pale yellow rather than like an in-your-face lemon yellow. Oh, I do like lemon. What can I have as lemon? I love a lemon meringue pie. I've had a lemon meringue pie in a while. Hello, tangents. This has been not having drinks since Friday. So yeah, yellow background. Top tips. But yeah, going on to the stuff about kind of, and I'd be interested to hear this actually from a maths perspective as well, Kirill, I think. In the sense of, one of the things that I've heard a lot of people say is maths teachers saying I couldn't teach without PowerPoint because obviously it provides pre-provided worksheets essentially in a time when worksheets aren't necessarily in the budget. And the thing that kind of prompted this thinking was I was speaking to my brother, who's an actuary, right? He is one of the best pure mathematicians I have ever met in my life. And I work with some very, very, very clever mathematicians in my school. But he's always been like in the 90% GCSE, A-level, smashed at first at University of Southampton in maths with actuarial studies. I went and sat in on one of his maths lectures at university. I just didn't understand what was going on. He's top end of his profession. And he was just talking through, he was going, I don't remember ever being taught maths using a PowerPoint. And his thing was, he was saying, and there was a couple of other people actually there at the time, who, because I kind of bounced it around, because my in-laws are mathematicians as well. And I had I was speaking to somebody who's quite high up in ICT, who's really good at maths. I was speaking to somebody who's a maths teacher, speaking to somebody who's a physics teacher, all at the same time. All part of my nerd group, who play board games together. And essentially the kind of general consensus was, yeah, actually, when we learned the most in maths was whenever it was exactly what Khalil's actually just said, is whiteboard and a pen, right? Whiteboard and a pen. They'd learned so much more whenever it was the teacher talking through their thinking and talking through styles and whatnot, whenever they were doing whenever they were kind of going through stuff. And I think that was, that's really interesting, I think. And I think that's a really good point. But I also do understand why, if your budget doesn't allow for textbooks, for example, and I do love a textbook, and I think it's a shame that because of budget cuts and some kind of weird attack on textbooks that seemed to happen around the same time that everyone was going, walk around the classroom to information stations and get stuff, that people started to say the textbooks weren't great, because the textbooks are amazing. I think it's a shame that textbooks went out the window, because I actually think textbooks can be better than PowerPoint. Phil says he hates PowerPoint, too restrictive, not suitable at all. And yeah, I think that's a really, really important point in there as well. I think that if you know what, if they work for you, they work for you. But I don't think they should be considered a compulsory element. And yeah, lots of interesting things. As people say, I create PowerPoints because I plan for 3 other members of staff and find it easier rather than to sit and explain every lesson in detail. And my kind of thing was, my question to that was, is easier always better? Is it sometimes easier to go, right, well, is it sometimes better to say, right, I'm going to dedicate time to my meetings where I'm going to talk about what we're going to go through in the next week, and here's some top tips and stuff to go through, and get the experts to feedback on that? I don't know. I find that in my intervention set, because we kind of did a several-fold intervention, instead of having like a regular form time, my year, we've got the main man's calling in. I'm excited. It's been so long since I got to speak to him. Is he going to come on? Oh, send your invite. Is he going to be here? He's going to be here. He's not going to be here. He's in here. He's a speaker.
I'm here, aren't I? Am I here?
He's there. Hello.
Hello, listen. I'm driving home, and I've just tuned in, and you're talking about things that I'm really, me and PowerPoint and maths. Oh my! I create them for myself in the department, and I don't even use them. I make them, and then I make them for myself, and I make them for my colleagues who are slightly less experienced, because then I can show the modeling that I would normally use if I were to kind of just teach with a board and a pen. And then there's a program that I prefer. It's called Active Inspire.
Okay.
And that's
a good name anyway. I like the name of that one.
It's more suitable to maths teaching. It doesn't have slides like PowerPoint. You can create slides, but it's not about like animations and stuff. It's more just about, it has a lot more tools and much more suitable to maths teaching. So I prefer to use that. But mainly the thing is with PowerPoint and maths is, yeah, like I said, it's far, that's my son in the background, far too restrictive. And I think I do agree with the point about if you're part of a big department, then creating a PowerPoint that everyone can teach from is useful. But I find, given my kind of, I would consider myself more experienced. I make a PowerPoint and then I just deviate from it, because then I can just react to what the class is saying, doing, or responding. And then I teach live. There's no point saying, right, we now move on to slide 2 when they're asking me questions about slide 1, and I've got to now adapt. So that's why I say it's too restrictive. So I often, like I said, plan it and then don't even use it.
I think that's really important, and that's the message that I was getting from like my brother and a couple of other people who are really passionate about maths and really went a long way with it. Is the key thing that they were saying was that they learned a lot more whenever the modeling was done live, and the kind of people's thought process was more clear. And that's one of those things that I quite enjoy doing, and even in a written subject, I think it's one of the few things that kind of goes across both different elements. And I think it's a really useful point to make, is modeling doesn't work as well unless it's done live, I don't think.
Yeah, that's the thing. So that's the trade-off that I find myself trying to do, is create animations that would pop up in a sequence that would match my predicted student thought process, if that makes sense. So I'm trying, for the modeling to be as authentic as possible, you want it to pop up in a certain order in the way you want to explain it to kids. But the problem is, sometimes you can anticipate all you want, but if the kid needs it in a certain way, maybe you need to circle. Obviously, you can draw on PowerPoints, everything else, but your options are either do animations or have the full model pop up at once. And the latter option is pointless, in my opinion. You don't want the full model popping up at once, because it gives the whole thing. The kids aren't going to think then; they're going to see it. So then you do the right. So I'm going to put my animations in. Then sometimes you need, like I said, you need to adapt. So it's just not very suitable for maths at all.
It's not always applicable to the question as well. They could have asked a question that means that model is needed, but then all of a sudden, as you said, you need to adapt to that thing, and that doesn't make any sense anymore. So that's a really important point, I think, with regards to that. And yeah, it does, it crosses subjects, big time crosses subjects.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I just want to say as well, by the way, I have massively enjoyed your Twitter as per usual over the half term. Obviously, first and foremost, I want to kind of publicly say congratulations for the promotion to senior leadership as of September. That's class.
Cheers, mate. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and I enjoy. What's that?
I said I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be a new challenge, definitely.
Yeah, you'd be awesome at that. I also really enjoyed the incident with the barbers and stuff. That gave me a good laugh. It was just the empty picture. I enjoyed it quite a lot, as well as many other things. And yeah, you had your first experience of sushi. How was that?
Underwhelming, my friend. Underwhelming. But what I deliberately tweeted something that I thought would get a bit of that was a bit contentious. I left out the fact that I got my sushi from Costco. So I didn't want to tell people I got sushi. Yeah, I didn't tell people I got. When I said I got it from Costco, my partner had bought it from Costco, and I was like, right, let me just try it. And I was underwhelmed.
That's fair.
So I thought I'd throw it out there just to get a bit of to see what people would say. And lo and behold, I got a whole bunch of comments back from people telling me that and I'm yet to try the real thing, which is probably true. So I need to go and try the real thing.
Yeah, it's not one of those things I'm a huge fan of, because I'm not really a huge fan of fish necessarily. But at the same time, I've only ever had it from, I think, Tesco's and Asda. So again, very on a similar thing. Whereas it seems to be one of those things that's really, really popular at the minute, though, isn't it? Sushi is one of those kind of like trendy things. People go, yeah, I love yo sushi and stuff like that. So yeah, maybe that's the one.
I'm not convinced, I'm honest, mate. And at the moment, I'm gonna have to come off the call. So I'm literally, there's a big fire engine and an ambulance about 10 or 20 meters from my house, and it's blocked the entire road. So I'm trying to, and the problem is, I'm trying to work out the back streets route, and it's not very easy. So I'm trying to just navigate. So I'm gonna have to come off the line and use Google Maps to see if Google Maps can save me.
Hey,
right now,
no problem at all.
I'm absolutely Chris Tuckered at the moment, mate. So I'm gonna have to try and work out how to get home. And problem is, I'm literally 2 minutes from my house.
Oh, fuming.
That's the thing, the way the roads interlock, it's all a problem. So I'm trying to work my way around it. But it's been a pleasure.
As always, it's been great hearing from you again. Thank you so much for your contribution, and best of luck getting home. All right.
Cheers,
see you later, buddy.
See you in a bit. Bye-bye.
Fantastic to hear a little bit more about kind of the ideas around PowerPoints and things there. And we do obviously wish Khalil the best of luck in getting home from his last-minute blockage. Nobody wants a last-minute blockage, right? Make of that what you will. Right, so yeah, I had lots of other things on it with regards to the PowerPoint. So to continue with that is, I had a lot of questions, by the way, of people kind of asking me to say, well, what do you mean by, it's Mal! Hi, Mal! Long time no speak. Hope you're doing well. Hope no last minute blockage is over with you. So yeah, what was I going to say here? Completely just being a muppet has just completely distracted me, as per usual. You think I'm used to it by now. Yes, a lot of people say, oh, well, what do you mean it de-skills people? And actually, I think that I'll pose an extra question because a lot of people seem to take issue with my idea that PowerPoints can de-skill people. I think making them doesn't, because it means that you actually go and you do your research and whatnot. But would you let a PGCE or trainee student go the whole year, September to when they leave in June or July, with only using other people's resources? Right? The answer I'm imagining that you're thinking is no, we wouldn't do that. You wouldn't get somebody to never make a single resource, because obviously resource creation is one of the best things you can do to kind of improve your subject knowledge, right? Miles straight in there. Well, no, definitely not. Well then, what's the reason for that? Well, from using other people's PowerPoints doesn't necessarily teach you the skills that you need to do. It doesn't kind of, somebody else might have made them, but you don't know how they're going to apply them. It was the whole issue. That's why I don't buy resources off TES, because there's no guarantee you're going to have a clue what's going on from them. Miles says part of for BGC was to create a scheme of work and resource for 1 unit of work. I think that's really important. I think that's actually a really good thing that we should probably get back to, really. With regards to PGCs, making that a compulsory element. Tom says it was his too. And I think it's so valid, right? And ultimately, because you'd say no to that, and I think everyone would say no to that, that's the reason why I say it de-skills people. If, as with what Khalil was saying as well, is if you say, and I think we should, I reiterate, we should share resources as departments. We absolutely should share resources as departments. I think it's super important. But we will all have days when we're busy. We will all have full lesson days. We'll have days where we haven't slept well. And we'll also have days when we don't necessarily check the resources as rigorously as we should, or adapt them as rigorously as we should. And that's where the de-skilling element comes in, is if you're overly reliant upon something because maybe you're not confident in it. I think that, like, there are staff out there who don't necessarily always engage with the PowerPoints they've been sent in the way that they could do, right? And I think it would be naive to assume that they did. And I think it's up to us then to make sure we strip them back and discuss them as a group. And I'd love to get Mike Charles to speak about this, because he's done a really good job of this actually in geography this year, as I said. He's stripped them right back and said, right, we include too much in our PowerPoints, right? How do we strip it back to the essential information and consider as a group what tasks best suit our groups? We can have suggestions in the notes. Why don't we just strip them right back and just get the fundamentals and essentials in there? And that kind of creates an emphasis on the kind of the subject teacher to go, right, well, how do I adapt this for my group? How do I include stretch? And ultimately, the main thing is, I think with stretch and challenges, ultimately all PowerPoint should be created with the capacity to provide the grade point 9 level of challenge, or the A star level of challenge, right? To give it an old school dynamic. But we always need to teach to the top. That's the ultimate thing. And then it's easier to create a complex teach to the top PowerPoint and then scaffold through it than it is to create one and then have to create reach tasks and whatnot through it as well, I think. Or it's aspirational tasks, or whatever the 1001 things are that you can come up with them. So again, that's kind of a response to some of the criticism that was kind of leveled at that. But yeah, a lot of people kind of agreed with it. And it's one of those things. I wasn't lambasting PowerPoints. I do think that we can all think of. I think that anyone who's been in education for a while can think of times when PowerPoints are not fit for purpose. They've got too many slides on them. Is the biggest issue. They are. Yeah, I think that's kind of the biggest thing. And I do think I will stick very adamantly that it does de-skill people, because I think that some people don't do research. And there's multiple things we could dig into there. Why don't people do the research? It would be great if every single person was an expert in every single topic, right? From key stage 3 to key stage 5. If every single person had read a book by a historian and was really kind of quite competent in knowing the historiography around everything, for example, in history. But that's not necessarily the case, because, let's face it, time. There's other ways around that, like kind of sharing, planning, getting people to plan things they're not experts in, and so on and so forth. But it's one of those things. I actually do think, I do think PowerPoint's an excellent tool, but I don't think it's necessarily a compulsory one. And I think that's kind of where my research, my kind of thing goes. And I know a lot of people kind of disagree with it and whatnot. I think it's a really useful point, and I really enjoy PowerPoint. And again, I'd be happy to hear about any alternate views of people who really like it, or people who maybe don't necessarily like it. But I think it's one of those things that I think we need to probably move away from. We need to reevaluate them. Are your PowerPoints fit for purpose? Are they too cumbersome? Is it clear is the teacher the lesson, or is the PowerPoint the lesson? Is everything just there for the teacher? They've got no work to do. They don't need to think about their class or how to adapt it, which normally, let's face it, we all need to adapt it in some way, shape, or form. That's kind of that, I guess, from there. And I do know that it was a bit controversial, the whole de-skilling thing. But yeah, certainly from the Gavin Williamson parody account, which thanks for that. Gavin Williamson parody account. But yeah, really interesting, I think. Really, really interesting conversations on there. And maybe I need to be more clear in the first place with it, but I do think it's really, really useful as a tool. But I think, as I said, my colleague Callum Hyde said, God, it's really weird. People just read something, they don't think about what it actually says, and just kind of go, right, I want to be annoyed by this. So I'll pretend that Kyle is saying that he hates PowerPoints, which isn't the case. I love PowerPoint. PowerPoint's great, but let's just reevaluate how we're using it, and if we're actually de-skilling staff by just giving them everything all the time. Something to consider. All right. So, folks, for the second time today, let's go over to the news with the wonderful Megan Goods.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News with Megan Goods.
This is your latest Teachers Talk Radio News. Recruitment levels for trainee teachers were missed for the 6th year running in the 2019-20 academic year. Following the last year, however, they are expected to increase, with the Welsh Government believing the pandemic has highlighted the importance of the profession. A government spokesman said, "Current trends suggest the pandemic has helped to highlight the vital role played by teachers, and more people are choosing to start teacher training." Senior Policy Officer for the NEU, Mary van den Hovel, also said she believes lockdown has helped the image of the profession, but that it was too early to know the exact impact. In 2019 in Wales, only 465 secondary trainees enlisted of an allocated 1,006 spaces. The Labour Party has called the government's £1.4 billion catch-up plan inadequate. The Shadow Education Secretary, Kate Green, said she was shocked at how little the plan contained, describing it as a betrayal of our young people, and stated that Kevin Collins's resignation makes it clear that the government's education recovery plan is totally insufficient to help every child bounce back from the impacts of the pandemic. The Labour Party is seeking a U-turn on the policy, testing government backbenchers with an Opposition Day debate this Wednesday in the House of Commons. Gavin Williamson has urged families to ensure they complete COVID tests before returning to school following the May half-term holiday. More than 50 million lateral flow tests have been taken by students across England since January. Williamson said he was hugely grateful to the families, students, and all those working in education for their role in making it happen. Despite the continued testing regimes, concern is still mounting in schools surrounding the Delta variant, which is thought to have a 40% higher transmission rate than other COVID variants. That was your daily education news briefing.
Megan, that was fab. Love that. I love all the new sounds, by the way, in there as well. I like this. I say a bit of like scary kind of sounds going in the middle of those ones. I like it. It's good. Really, really good. Awesome. Fantastic. So, folks, we're into the last 15 minutes of the show, and it has to be said, I'm fairly certain I'm sweating nearly as much as I was playing football last night. That's what this how warm this room is. I do have my own new sounds today. Yeah, I do apologize. I didn't realize you could hear it. I mean, I'm not surprised you can, but my computer fan is struggling as a result of the heat in the room. I don't actually have a solution to that other than to put ice in my computer, which would cause a different issue entirely. So I'll just try and talk over it so you can't hear it, because I like the sound of my own voice. Woohoo! So I do apologize for the little bit of background noise, folks. I'm saying a little bit. I'm aware that it can be quite loud at times. Yeah, just consider it being, it's just my mind loading, put it that way. So a couple of different things to kind of talk about that have crept up in the news. The first one is Williamson, our Lord and Saviour, Gavin Williamson, who Tom Hopkinsburg wants to make the Secretary of State for Space. And Mal and I both agreed, only if it's a live-in position, which would be, yeah, I think we can all agree with that. Although I did read that he is very much rumoured to be getting fired in the next cabinet reshuffle, which is like 18 months overdue. But yeah, he was saying that too many schools are restricting lunch hours, which is brilliant, because there was the famous thing of him making the exact opposite statement a while ago, saying people were getting too much time for lunch hours. So essentially what he said is too many schools are restricting the lunch breaks while they're reviewing the length of the school day and things. So he said essentially the kind of education recovery plans, which, by the way, this whole thing that we're kind of having this narrative of education recovery is getting to a point where I think it's actually even the talk about it is having a negative impact on the students, more so than I think actually the missing learning has been. to give it the equally as awkward phrase. But what he's essentially, so the Department of Education, I'll show you what Williamson was saying in front of MPs, was essentially that, essentially as it's self-explanatory, is that the school lunch hour has become increasingly restricted and is now a lunch half hour. I mean, yeah, make up your mind, Gav. That's it. Oh, got an update from Khalil as he drove the longest diversion route, only to find that the road blockage has now been cleared. Isn't that just typical? Standard. They were waiting for you there. They're waiting for you there. And yeah, so I think it's interesting. How long are lunch hours at your schools? I mean, ours are split lunches. So I guess the students get about 20 minutes to eat and about 20 minutes outside. And then we do like a form time at lunch instead of in the morning. So that's kind of how we kind of split. They do get a fair amount of time, to be fair, outside. We do family dining as well, which I love, by the way, which is where the staff sit with their forms for lunch, and the form can't leave. So that means the form has to sit together. It also means that the form can't leave until everyone's finished, essentially. And I know that some places have taken that to the next level as well. Of if you've got hot meals, they kind of serve it to each other, but we're not quite at that point, I don't think, yet. But I do love that. I've really, really enjoyed the family dining element. But I do think it's interesting. But I'm trying to think of how long I had. I'm pretty sure I had about 40, 45 minutes, but I can't think of how long other people had. But yes, Khalil, you're back. Hello. Khalil, you there? Khalil.
I think that's a pocket dial, mate.
Hey, butt dial, fantastic. There we go. Mal, it's not just you anymore. The joys of a butt dial, 100% butt dial. You know what? It's turning into a Graham special, the old butt dials. I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is. It just attracts people's butts to dial in on this show, making me the butt of all jokes. You can have that one. Sorry, that was a bit lame, bit behind that one. Yeah, I'm curious what times people get in school. I did see somebody commenting on it, said they only had 20 minutes in total, which is sad. Another thing, kind of obviously going directly in opposite to the comments about missing kind of application numbers, is the idea that one of the major recruiters for education said that teacher training applications are at a 50-year high. So yes, it's a major initial teacher training providers reported that applications this year are at their highest for more than half a century, and that's the University of Sussex. And in part of me wonders is the majority of the reason for that, because obviously on face value of it, education has been one of the most secure environments to work in a year which has been incredibly insecure. So I'm wondering, is that very much the point of it? People have stayed working in that time whenever other people have had to go into furlough or have lost jobs. I mean, obviously, I think just compare for 1 second, and I'm very, very defensive of the hospitality industry because my in-laws work in hospitality. But I can see like face value, kind of the things people have. But I mean, look at the kind of the difficulties that have been faced by the hospitality sector this year. 80% here, low funding for businesses, the whole way through, not being open but having to pay taxes, or not being open but having to pay national insurance. If you're in one of the kind of majorly hit zones, education looks like a really education's like the thing that it's always, you can never close education fully, right? It's always going to be needed. So I think it becomes interesting as a result of that. I think it would be naive, but I don't doubt it will happen, that the government might put a spin on this and go, yeah, teacher training applications are higher than they've ever been, or our recruitment's working. I think what's actually happening there is primarily that education looks like a profession from the outside that is incredibly secure as a job. So I hope I'm wrong. I hope it's becoming more appealing for other reasons, and that people enjoyed how heroic the profession's been within the last year. But yeah, I think it's a really interesting one. Kind of what's been said here is the pattern is largely due to applicants feeling teachers a safer option, particularly when other businesses are failing. So it does agree with what I've said there. And also, we do get quite a few applicants seeking a career change after deciding that their current job is maybe too precarious in the current economic environment. It's the same thing. Others taking stock of their lives as a result of the pandemic and having always wanted to teach or taking the opportunity to make that change. Again, an interesting one. I do think people are reevaluating their careers more than I've ever experienced before at the minute. I'm leading a teacher recruitment process. We're trying to run we're going to run a teacher training program as part of our trust. And I have noticed there's a lot of people who are wanting to kind of change from other professions, possibly as a result of COVID, possibly because obviously I think that it's been a great time for reflection this last year, hasn't it? So I think that's been really kind of interesting. And the last one I was going to talk about with regards to kind of current news, because I do like to do a little bit on current news, because I like to kind of fire my significantly sunburned and peeling nose into things. Yeah, it's a wonderful image for you all there. Is the idea about year 11s, because I noticed that Amanda Spielman, now I know it was kind of hinted that people should keep the year 11s for as long as they could, year 13s as long as they could, but I noticed Amanda Spielman obviously waited until like during the May term break, after the horses bolted, as is Ofsted fashion, to kind of go, oh, we're going to be doing checks to make sure that people have been looking after the kids and making sure that any learning's been lost or any lost learning's been filled in, and what are schools doing for that. Ultimately, anyone who works in education is aware that keeping year 11s in until the end of June is a very, very strenuous task. A very strenuous task. They are very much aware there's not exams going on. They're very aware that whatever is going to be done has been done by this point. Keeping them in beyond this, apart from keeping them in beyond this, I don't see a point in. I also think you have to bear in mind that no year group has had the disruption that they have had of lessened GCSE or changed GCSE specs, to not having them, to having 3 lockdowns, to all of the different things that this kind of year group has went through. And I think that's the argument being made by Tabitha McIntosh here is that that ultimately these year 11s and year 13s need some time to chill now. Now, I do think what schools should be providing is world of work opportunities. I think they should be providing certainly pastoral care, and well-being care. But I think keeping them in for the sake of keeping them in at this point is utterly pointless. And I think a lot of them are very, very keen to do. Like, I know we're running some like virtual A-level taster sessions, even though we don't have a sixth form next year. We've been running some of them for students, and the kind of uptake's been relatively low. What's been interesting is we have actually offered our year 11 students the opportunity to come back and do some like work experience with us, like do some kind of scholaring, helping out in departments, helping out like classrooms during classes, and the uptake on that's been really substantial. Because I guess it's one of those things, isn't it? I guess that it's difficult to say goodbye to something you've known for so long, and I guess it's one of those things. And that's kind of one of the things I'm currently toying with is I've started to have students ask, "Sir, are you leaving at the end of the year?" And I've so far kind of like been able to dodge the question. One person today said, "Do you promise that you're not leaving?" And I was like, I've managed to completely dodge the question entirely. And I don't know when I'm going to tell them. I didn't want to tell you your chance till after they've done their mocks, but I don't know what I'm going to do, folks. I don't know what I'm going to do. It's too emotional. I've taught these guys for 4 years. I love them. They're amazing. And I think I'm still happily kind of living in this kind of thing where I'm just ignoring the fact that I'm leaving a place I've been in for a long time. I've got such a strong affinity towards. But yeah, that's a fun one. But yeah, that's kind of one of these kind of things that's kind of all been mentioned. It's kind of the rite of passage, and it's one of those things that they might go to music festivals, they might travel with friends, the year 11s. They might do very little. They might play video games. They might sleep. They might walk around in hoods and intimidate the elderly who were like, "Oh, we weren't like that when we were younger. The current generation's worse than the last one." Which, if that was the case for every single generation that says it, we'd be in anarchy. So I don't necessarily agree with that either. But yeah, I think it's important. I think the year 11s. Sorry, did you enjoy that, Tom? Oh, Tom, I didn't realize you were here. Welcome, Tom. Tom Rogers has been a very naughty boy. It's kind of very Monty Python, that, I think. He's not the Messiah. It's that kind of thing, isn't it? Yes, okay, no, I do wonderful impressions, Tom. You don't get to become this kind of charismatic comedic genius overnight, Tom. And that brings us to everyone's favorite section of the show. And Tom Hopkins' work, you're not going to be able to find what you're looking for tonight, because I couldn't find it when I looked for it earlier, and I just remember the recipe for this. So, are you ready for the recipe of the week? And my meal of the week, my recipe of the week, this week is a Thai green curry noodle soup. Right? It's that simple. Long, lots of words. Thai green curry noodle soup. It's amazing. It's unbelievably good. It's the first. The reason I decided to go for this one is it's the first proper meal I ever started making. To the extent that, like, whenever I go back home at Christmas and stuff, how am I going to spoil it? I don't know. It's going to include Smarties or something bizarre, right? And just an entire, just spring rolls in the middle of it to ruin it. Spring rolls ruin nothing. But yeah, it was because it was one of the first things I ever made. It was awesome. It's delicious. But I'll get to it really quickly because I'm running over now. Essentially, all it is I always put I do a pulled chicken now, so I wrap a couple of chicken breasts in tin foil, fire them in the oven for 30-40 minutes until they're cooked, and in that time I get some spring onions, but you could equally do it with shallots, and fry them off, cut them up, fry them off with some garlic, lots of garlic, just tons of garlic, fire all the garlic in there, so fry them off until it's fragrant. Then add in your Thai green curry paste. I always add in a full jar of the Thai green curry paste. Just go to town on it. And then mix all of that up. And then fire in some, I use 1 chicken stock cube and 1 vegetable stock cube. And fire tons of water into that. And then boil that off for a little bit. Then I add in regular double cream, right? I add in a lot of regular double cream, but you could equally use coconut cream if you want to make it a little bit more authentic. I then use dried basil. If you want to go to town on this and make it really, really good, use my favorite herb in the whole world, which is Thai holy basil. It is, oh my days, it's delicious. I use dried basil because of sheer easiness. And then after that's done, you get the chicken out of the oven, you pull it using 2 forks, fire it back in, add your rice noodles. So I prefer using like vermicelli. In this case, I'm not a huge fan of the flat rice noodles. So, but you can equally use them. I use the vermicelli. You fire that in, boom, Bob's your uncle, done, and it's delicious. And you're welcome. It doesn't take very long. It's an easy one. The way that I've made it carb-free, if you're interested in that, is just taking out the noodles and not doing it with the noodles because it's delicious enough to do it. But let's face it, noodles, especially rice noodles, are gorgeous. So yeah, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of very limited ages, including Tom Rogers, Roger. Thank you so much for tuning in this week. I will see you next week for more pedagogy, leadership, current affairs. If you're interested in appearing in the show as a guest, then please obviously do let us know. And as I said previously, if you're interested in becoming a host, please do let us know. As always, folks, I'll see you next Tuesday from 6 till 7:30 p.m. Pasta la pizza. See you next time, ladies and gentlemen.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.